I want you to picture a very ordinary moment, because most important financial turning points do not look dramatic while they are happening. It is 3 o'clock in the morning. You are awake, the room is quiet, the ceiling is dark, your body is tired, but your mind is running through a list of things that could go wrong tomorrow. The car could make a sound you have never heard before. The computer you need for work could stop turning on. Your job could suddenly become less secure than it felt last week. A medical bill could arrive, a pet could need an emergency visit, a family member could ask for help, and if you are like most people, the problem is not only that these things could happen. The problem is that each one of them feels like it could knock over the entire structure of your life. That is what financial fragility feels like. It is not poverty in the obvious sense. It is not always hunger or eviction or total collapse. Sometimes it is just the constant feeling that the world has a hand on the edge of your table, and one unexpected push could send everything on it to the floor. Most people think money milestones are just numbers. They think $10,000 is just $10,000. $100,000 is just $100,000. And $1 million is just the number people dream about when they want to feel successful. But that is not how systems work. Certain thresholds change the behavior of the system itself. They change your psychology. They change your probability of making good decisions. They change how much risk you can absorb. They change whether you are forced to react or allowed to think. The first major threshold for most people is not $1 million. It is not even $100,000. It is $10,000. That number is not magic. It is not a guarantee. It does not make you rich. It does not mean you can stop working. It does not mean you can suddenly live without discipline. But it changes the game because it gives you something most people do not have. It gives you room, and room is one of the most underrated forms of wealth. Before you have that room, life. You go to the grocery store and you are not really shopping. You are calculating. You compare cereal brands not because you care deeply about cereal, but because one choice feels safe and the other feels like it may disturb the budget. A friend suggests dinner, and you do not think first about whether you want to go. You think about whether admitting the truth will embarrass you. So you invent a reason. You say you are busy. You say you have something else going on. But the truth is that a $25 meal feels too dangerous. That is what happens when you are playing defense with money. Every decision becomes a stress test. You are not choosing from possibility, you are choosing from fear. And when people live in that state for long enough, they begin to think that is normal. They believe that constant tension is just part of adult life. They adapt to the anxiety. They stop noticing that every small expense is taking mental energy away from their future. But then something happens when the balance in the account reaches 5 figures for the first time. Again, it is not that you become wealthy. It is not that you become free, but the system inside you begins to change. The first change is your relationship with risk. When you have almost no savings, every decision feels dangerous because every decision carries downside you cannot absorb. A new job opportunity is not just a new job opportunity. It is a potential disaster if it does not work. Moving to a better city is not just a chance at a better life. It is a threat because the move is a certification, a business idea, a tool that could make you more productive. Each one looks like a gamble. That is what lack of liquidity does. It turns even rational risk into emotional danger. But when you have $10,000 set aside, the same decision looks different. You still think carefully. You still do not want to be reckless. But you are no longer making every choice with a knife at your back. You may ask for the promotion you were avoiding because, deep down, you feared the consequences of tension with your boss. You may take a course that raises your earning power because the cost no longer feels like a threat to your survival. You may leave a bad deal, a bad rental, a bad job, or a bad arrangement because you are not trapped by the next bill. That is a huge distinction. The money does not make you careless. It makes you less desperate. And in life, the difference between boldness and desperation is enormous. Desperation shortens your time horizon. It makes you accept bad terms. It makes you sell at the wrong time, buy at the wrong time, borrow at the wrong time, and trust the wrong people. A modest reserve extends your time horizon. It lets you pause. And many of the biggest mistakes in life come from being unable to pause. There is also a biological side to this that people underestimate. When a person has no buffer, the body begins to treat ordinary financial life as a threat. Stress chemicals stay high, sleep gets worse. Small events create big reactions because the nervous system is not judging the event. It is judging the lack of backup behind the event. The check engine light becomes a threat. A dentist appointment becomes a threat. An email from work becomes a threat. A rent increase becomes a threat. The event is often not catastrophic in itself. The lack of margin makes it feel catastrophic. Now imagine the same check engine light with $10,000 in the bank. You are not happy. Nobody likes repairs. But the event moves from catastrophe to inconvenience. That change matters more than people think. A person who is panicked usually does not make good decisions. A person who is annoyed can still think. When you are not constantly worried about money, you make better decisions everywhere else. You sleep better. You are more patient with the people close to you. You are more productive at work. You are less reactive. You are not spending so much of your mental energy on survival calculations that you have nothing left for improvement. This is one of the principles I believe about money. Money is not only a tool for buying things, it is a tool for reducing bad decisions. A reserve of cash, properly understood, is not sitting there doing nothing. It is producing psychological yield. The yield is calm. The yield is options. The yield is not having to turn a temporary problem into permanent damage. That is why the majority of the value of $10,000 does not come from spending it. In fact, if it is functioning correctly, you do not want to spend it often. Its value comes from knowing it is there. That may sound strange because people are trained to evaluate money only by what it can buy. But some of the most valuable money you will ever have is money you do not spend. The presence of that money changes the way the rest of your life operates. It means the next emergency does not automatically become credit card debt. It means you do not have to sell investments when the market is down because your tires wore out. It means you do not have to take the first job offer simply because you cannot survive another month. It means you can think, and thinking clearly when other people are forced to react is a real advantage. Most people who build a real financial cushion do not immediately use it on disasters. What usually happens is more interesting. Once survival anxiety goes down, their attention changes. They start noticing opportunities that were always there but were invisible under stress. They notice a certification that might increase their income. They notice a side project they could test. They notice a cheaper insurance plan. They notice waste in their budget. They notice a better job opening. They notice that their current environment is limiting them. That is the emergency fund effect. It protects against emergencies, but it also creates the mental room to pursue opportunities. And that is where the second major change happens. You begin to carry yourself differently. When you know you have money in the bank, you negotiate differently. You do not have to say yes to every poor arrangement. You do not have to tolerate every unreasonable demand. You do not have to cling to a situation simply because you have no cushion. This confidence is not arrogance. Arrogance usually comes from insecurity. The confidence I am talking about is quieter. It is the knowledge that you can survive the short term while you make a better long-term decision. That quiet confidence often produces better outcomes. In job interviews, people can feel desperation. In negotiations, people can feel urgency. In relationships, people can feel dependence. When your financial life is fragile, you may not say any of that out loud, but it shows up in your posture, your voice, your tolerance, and your choices. A $10,000 cushion does not make you powerful in the big sense, but it removes enough pressure that you can act more like your long-term self that matters. Now, I also want to be clear about something. If you are at zero right now, $10,000 may sound far away. It may sound like a number that belongs to other people. It may feel like looking across a river without seeing a bridge. But the hardest part is usually not the math. The hardest part is identity. Most people try to save money the way they try to go on a crash diet. They become intense for a few weeks. They cut everything. They feel deprived. Then the pressure builds, the old habits return, and the identity never changes. But people who actually get to the first serious savings milestone do something different. They begin to see themselves as the kind of person who keeps money. That sounds simple, but it is profound. When you see yourself as someone who saves, you begin to notice different things. You notice when a recurring charge is no longer serving you. You notice when convenience is costing you more than the convenience is worth. You notice when you are spending to regulate emotion rather than solve a real need. And over time, you stop viewing saving as punishment. You start viewing it as building power. Saving the first $1,000 can be very hard because you are not just building an account. You are breaking an old pattern. You are proving to yourself that money can stay with you. You are creating a small gap between income and consumption. The second 1,000 is easier because the identity has started to form. By the fifth or 6,000, the process often becomes more automatic. You have built habits, you have reduced leaks, you have learned where your own weaknesses are, you are less impressed by purchases that only give a temporary feeling. That is why the first 10,000 is so important. It is not only the amount, it is the person you become while accumulating it. Another thing happens at that threshold. You begin to understand the difference between earning money and keeping money. This distinction is much bigger than most people think. There are people earning very large salaries who are still fragile because every dollar that comes in has already been assigned to consumption, debt, status, or lifestyle. They look successful, but the system underneath is weak. If the income stops for even a short period, the whole structure shakes. There are other people earning much less who are building real strength because they have learned to retain a portion of what flows through their hands. The second person may not look impressive, but their trajectory may be better. Wealth is not just income. Wealth is the ability to keep resources, allocate them well, and increase options over time. When you save $10,000, you have passed an important test. You have demonstrated that you can keep money. That is the core skill. Investing comes later, passive income comes later, compounding comes later. If you cannot keep money, more income will not solve the problem. It will only make the leaks larger. I have seen that pattern many times. A person thinks their problem is income, but when income rises, expenses rise with it. The car improves, the apartment improves, the dinners improve, the subscriptions improve. The financial stress does not improve because the behavior did not change. The first 10,000 teaches a different behavior. It teaches restraint. It teaches delayed gratification. It teaches that a dollar held can be more powerful than a dollar spent. It teaches that the goal is not to impress other people, but to increase control over your own life. Now let us talk about what the money actually does in practical terms. $10,000 can handle most ordinary disruptions that keep people trapped. A car repair that would have gone on a credit card becomes manageable. A medical bill becomes unpleasant but survivable. A job loss becomes a period of pressure rather than immediate panic. A family emergency becomes something you can respond to without destroying your own foundation. Most financial disasters for ordinary households are not enormous. They are often in the range of a few hundred to a few $1,000s. But when a household has no reserve, those events get financed at terrible terms. A small emergency becomes high-interest debt. The debt creates monthly payments. The payments reduce the ability to save. The reduced savings increase the probability of more debt. That is the cycle. A buffer interrupts the cycle. It does not remove risk. Nothing removes risk, but it changes the consequences of risk. That is why after $10,000, your financial life begins to have shock absorbers. And a life with shock absorbers feels very different from a life where every bump hits the frame directly. The opportunity side matters just as much. Suppose there is a course that costs $2,000 and may increase your earning power. Without savings, that course is just a fantasy with a cushion. It becomes a decision. Suppose there is a move to a better job market without savings. The moving cost blocks you. With a cushion, the option exists. Suppose there is a networking event, a license, a tool, or a temporary unpaid period required to switch into a better field. Without savings, you may never take the step. With savings, you can evaluate it based on probability and payoff, rather than fear alone. This does not mean you should take every risk. In fact, one of the benefits of a cushion is that it allows you to be more selective. You can say no to bad risks and yes to reasonable ones. People confuse risk-taking with randomness. That is not what I mean. Good risk-taking is controlled. You know the downside. You can survive the downside. The upside is worth considering. The decision fits a broader plan, A person without savings often cannot take good risks because even a small downside would be damaging. That is why financial security and opportunity are connected. Security is not the opposite of ambition. Security is often what makes intelligent ambition possible. The next thing $10,000 changes is decision fatigue. Every day, people make small money decisions, name brand or generic, lunch out or food from home, gas today or tomorrow, pay the bill now or wait until payday, fix the issue now or hope it goes away. Each decision by itself seems small, but the total load is heavy. When your account is weak, every small choice becomes a survival calculation. That constant calculating drains mental energy. When you have a real buffer, many of those small decisions stop carrying the same emotional weight. You still make wise choices, you still do not waste money, but you are no longer choosing from fear 50 times a day. That frees up attention. And attention is one of your most valuable assets. If all of your attention is consumed by avoiding collapse, you cannot design a better life. You cannot think strategically, you cannot study, you cannot build, you cannot observe patterns, you cannot plan. A cushion gives attention back to you. That is why some people feel emotional the first time they go through a normal day with money saved. Not because they want to spend lavishly, but because a layer of fear has been removed. They can buy the food they actually want within reason. They can answer a bill without spiraling. They can make plans more than one paycheck ahead. That may not sound glamorous, but it is a form of freedom, and freedom often begins quietly. Now, I do not want to romanticize $10,000. It will not protect you from every storm. It will not solve a serious medical crisis. It will not make housing cheap. It will not make you immune to bad luck. But it can take the most common short-term shocks and prevent them from becoming long-term setbacks. That is a major improvement in probability. And one of the biggest things I have learned is that life is largely a game of improving probabilities. You do not control outcomes. You control preparations. You do not eliminate bad events. You reduce their ability to compound against you. Without savings, bad events compound. With savings, good habits compound. That is the shift. If you are currently living paycheck to paycheck, the practical beginning does not need to be dramatic. You do not need to save $10,000 at once. You do not need to transform your entire life overnight. You need to start building the system that makes saving normal. For some people, that may be $25 a month. For some 50, for some 100. The number matters less at first than the consistency, because consistency builds identity. Once the identity is established, the amounts can increase. You may find that there is more flexibility in the budget than it felt like. Coffee, takeout, convenience purchases, subscriptions, impulsive spending, all of these may be small alone but large together. The point is not to live miserably. The point is to become conscious. Awareness changes behavior. And when behavior changes, the balance changes. There is a deeper principle here. Many people think they are controlled by the amount they earn. Income matters, of course, but at many income levels, the difference between progress and stagnation is not income alone. It is intentionality. One person spends unconsciously and wonders why nothing remains. Another person spends deliberately and creates a gap. That gap is where freedom begins. Once you have $10,000 saved, something else often happens. You start thinking about the next $10,000. That is a powerful moment before the first $10,000. Savings may feel like a defensive act. You are protecting yourself from disaster. After the first $10,000, savings begins to look offensive. You are building optionality. You are building a base from which investments, businesses, education, and better life decisions become possible. The first 10,000 changes the question from how do I survive to what should I build? That question is much more powerful. Financial stress leaks into every human connection. It makes people irritable. It makes them avoidant. It creates shame. It creates resentment toward people who seem more stable. It can turn normal conversations into arguments because money is not only money when you have none, it becomes a proxy for fear. When the fear decreases, the person changes. They may become more patient. They may become more present. They may be less embarrassed. They may stop hiding from social situations because not every invitation feels like a threat to the budget. Again, this does not require becoming rich. It requires not being constantly one event away from damage. That is why the first real savings milestone has ripple effects into areas that do not appear financial at first. Sleep improves. Work performance improves. Patience improves. Negotiation improves. Confidence improves. Opportunity recognition improves. And those improvements can lead to more income, which leads to more savings, which leads to more calm, which leads to better decisions. That is the positive loop. The opposite loop is also real. Stress leads to bad decisions. Bad decisions lead to worse finance. Worse finances lead to more stress. Your job is to break the negative loop and begin the positive one. The $10,000 milestone is one of the first points where many people feel that loop reverse. You no longer feel like money is only leaving. You begin to feel that money can stay. Then you begin to feel that money can work. Then you begin to think about building assets. But the foundation is always the same. First, then use the reserve to protect your judgment. Then use your judgment to create better outcomes. That sequence matters. Trying to invest aggressively without a cushion can be dangerous, because a small emergency can force you to sell. Trying to build a business without any margin can cause you to accept bad terms. Trying to negotiate without any runway can make you take the first offer. Trying to improve your life without financial breathing room often means making decisions while under stress. The buffer protects the quality of your decisions. That is its real return. So if you are looking at your account and the number is small, I do not want you to feel shame. Shame is not useful. Shame creates avoidance. I want you to see the system clearly. The person you become while saving your first $10,000 may be more valuable than the money itself. You become someone who can delay gratification, someone who can notice patterns, someone who can say no, someone who can prepare before trouble arrives, someone who can act from probability rather than panic. That is the real milestone. The money is the evidence. And once you have evidence that you can change your financial behavior, your entire map of the future changes. You stop seeing yourself as a person who is permanently stuck. You start seeing yourself as a person who can build. That is a very different identity. And identity drives repeated behavior. Repeated behavior drives outcomes. Most people want the outcome without becoming the person who can sustain it. That is why they fall back. They want savings without becoming a saver. They want wealth without becoming disciplined. They want freedom without building the habits that make freedom stable. The first $10,000 is an initiation into a different way of living, not glamorous, not flashy, not something people on social media will applaud, but real, because when the next unexpected event comes, and it will come, you will not be the same person you were before. You will not be staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. with the same level of fear. You will not be forced into the same short-term decisions. You will not have to make survival calculations all day long. You will have room, and that room gives you the ability to make better choices. The first $10,000 is not the finish line. It is the first point where the system begins to work for you instead of constantly working against you. It is where money stops being only a source of anxiety and starts becoming a tool for options. It is where you begin to understand that financial progress is not only about becoming rich someday, it is about becoming less fragile today. And when you become less fragile, you become more capable. When you become more capable, you take better risks. When you take better risks, you create better opportunities. And when you create better opportunities, the next stage of wealth becomes much more likely. That is why this milestone matters. Not because $10,000 is everything, because it changes how you move through everything. If you can start small. If you can only save a little, save a little. If the number feels distant, focus on the system, not the distance. A strong system repeated long enough changes the number, and one day, figure balance for the first time. Understand what it means. It means you did not just save money, you changed your relationship with uncertainty. You built a small but real shield between your life and chaos. You proved that money can stay with you. You created breathing room, and breathing room is where good decisions begin.